Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome to Battleground Games Live. I am Andrew, broadcasting from the loft at Battleground Games and Hobbies in Abington, Massachusetts. And I want to do a little bit of painting. I haven't done any painting on stream in a while. I've done a little bit off stream. So I had been working on the Star Wars Legion demo kit for the store. Had been painting all of these figures, and that was just prior to PAX. The timing was such that PAX started right as Star Wars Legion came out, which was kind of a crunch time. I got all of the figures in the demo box, or the starting box of Star Wars Legion, built, assembled, and primed, but I did not get much paint on them. Let's bring up some examples here. So you may recall, if you were watching, that the only two figures I actually mostly completed were Luke and Vader. So here is how Luke ended up when all was said and done. You can see I didn't attempt any detail work on his face, didn't try to do anything cool with the eyes. I'm not super confident with my painting skills, and I was worried that if I tried too hard, because he's one of the two primary pieces in the Legion starter box, I kind of wanted him to be a marquee piece, look really good, and I didn't want to ruin him by mucking up his face. I have done that with figures in the past. So just with my skill level, I felt it was best just do a flesh wash on it, let it pop out some of the details with just the wash, and trust in the sculpt, basically. So there's Luke, and I also did Vader. There he is, the Dark Lord of the Sith himself. I am very pleased with how Vader came out in the end. You can see I got a lot of the fine detail on his chest plate and on his belt. I did manage to get a little bit of gloss on his eyes. I don't know if you can see that, but I think it comes across. He just came out really well. So I'm very happy with Vader. I'm doing their bases, you can see, in red and blue. Luke's went on very nicely. Vader's is a little patchy, so I'm going to do a second layer on that base. And then I think I'm going to use a technical top to make the base pop a little bit more, make it glossy and sort of gem-like. Anyhow, that's Luke and Vader, and they are pretty much where I want them to be. But everybody else is just primed. So very bland. We actually got a chance to play this on stream. If you were watching last Friday, we played the Learn to Play variant of the game on stream last Friday, and I wish that the figures had been more distinct. I made the mistake of using a green mat, forest mat, or a field mat actually, with the green figures, and I don't think that they came across very well, just with the distance that the camera was from the gameplay and everything. But for the next time we stream, hopefully, I will have had an opportunity to make these guys a little bit more distinctive. Oh, and if you were watching while I was doing the assembly portion of the Star Wars minis, of the Legion minis, you will have seen that one of them was missing a part, and I contacted Fantasy Flight, and they got me this guy's arm, which was not in the bag when I was assembling him. So he's got an arm now, along with the controller that goes to the AT-RT here. So Fantasy Flight's customer service and for getting missing parts is exceptionally well designed. You go in, You tell them what model, you tell them what piece, and I had that piece within just a few days. They mailed it straight out to the store. So that was spectacular. Also a note, if you watched me when I was building these guys and you saw me basing everything, you probably noticed that I based over the lines that are on the large bases, the ones for this and for the speeders. Because some of the guns are front mounted, I need to find a way to demarc on the model which way is front facing. So that's a dilemma for future me. I should have left those lines distinct on the base, but I just filled them in when I was basing it. I mean, it's going to be relatively simple. I'll just put I'll draw a line on the base to show where the front gun should be. Basically, the mechanic is when you're measuring attacks with a front-facing weapon, you use a measuring tool to measure out from the lines on the base to make a cone where the gun could reasonably hit. Anyhow, for today, I would very much like to get some paint onto the Rebels because they are the ones that I feel are going to be the most fun to paint. They have the most variety in their sculpts, and I'm really looking forward to getting a little bit of painting on these guys. I'm actually going to start with the two Duros troopers, which are these guys here. You can see they're Duros aliens from, if you recall, the Cantina scene, and they've been in Star Wars Rebels and various other things. I debated a little while about how I was going to do their skin. So if you look up the shot from the actual movie, here's what the Duros looks like in episode 4 in the Cantina scene. And you can see it's a very sort of blue-gray skin and red eyes. And in the Star Wars Rebels, they went a much brighter blue. So my choice is, I've decided I'm going to go with a very, very light blue. This is a blue I've used before. This is the just deep sky blue from Vallejo. And I'm going to do the eyes in Evil Sunz Scarlet. And then I'm going to rely on a dark, dark wash to darken it up and bring out the details. So this is going to be a joy because it's a great big surface. It's not, tiny, tiny detail. I'm just going to dive in and get some blue on these guys. I want to say thank you to the many people who have watched the YouTube version of my assembly of the Star Wars Legion folks. I actually had one person in the store thank me for putting those videos together. I did it mostly because I felt like documenting my adventure as I was doing that painting. But I'm quite gratified to hear that for some people it was actually a very valuable experience to have that on stream so that they could see for reference what I was doing. I stress again, I am an amateur painter. I have only been painting for about a year on minis. I don't have a lot of complex techniques, but that's kind of the right level. If you're painting this particular set, it's not a super complex set to build or paint, so it lends itself to an amateur who's learning to paint, which I thought was fantastic. So let's start getting some stuff in here. So yeah, thank you to everybody on YouTube who ended up enjoying the painting. I certainly enjoyed doing it on stream. I'm certain I've said this before, but there's something so relaxing about just applying paint to a figure. should have done his eyeballs first. Let me actually do that. I'm not taking my own painting advice, which is do the bits that are lower down before you do the bits that are higher up. So I should start with his eyes. Now here's where we come to the eternal debate. Battleground Games carries both Vallejo and Army Painter paints. Or I'm sorry, Vallejo and GW paints. Army Painter is Vallejo. I vastly prefer the Vallejo paints, mostly because they are, oh man, I got way too much paint on that. I may need a finer brush for this, because his eyes are super teeny. I mean, not the teeniest. I need just the barest little bit of paint on the end of my brush for this. Here we go. But I very much prefer the eyedroppers because they, yeah, this is why I wanted to do the lower layer first. If I go up onto his skin a little bit, when I come back with the blue in a moment, it'll cover that up. Man, that's bright. That might be too bright, but when you get the wash on there, it's going to darken. So I'm hoping that's going to be okay. Just tipping my brush a little bit so that I can get just the barest bit of paint on there and get that onto him. But yeah, I like the eyedroppers better because they don't dry out as fast, because you don't have to have the pot open while you're painting with it. And there we go. Looks pretty good. I'll use a gloss when I'm done, just to make his eyes reflective. And with the eyedroppers, you have more control over how much paint you end up getting on your palette. Oh man, paint everywhere. That was awful. But that's okay, because I'm going to paint over bits of it. I don't know if you can see it here, but the primer that I used on this guy is a little pockmarked. Not super happy with that. There we go. Trying to be a little bit more delicate. That other eye is kind of a disaster. There we go. So, okay, comparison. This eye here, not bad. That eye, disaster. It's okay. That's one of the things about painting. You can always go back over it. Okay, so that's it for the Evil Sunz Scarlet. Now let's do the light blue. This is the same light blue that I used for Vader's lightsaber, or I'm sorry, for Luke's lightsaber, which you can see is very, very light blue indeed. So it's going to look very bright until I get that wash on there. I've definitely said before that wash is just a miracle. When you get that wash on there, it's astounding what a difference it makes. I'm trying to be a little delicate, maybe not put too much paint on his collar if I can avoid it. It's nice to be painting again. I mean, I love packs, but I've missed just being able to do this. I've missed being here with you guys. That's very nice. Of course, through the miracle of YouTube, for those of you who end up watching this series of me painting and modeling Legion, the YouTube playlist, it will appear that no time at all has passed. It's just going to jump straight ahead. Oh man, this paint is going on thick. It's okay. Ever since I built these guys, I've been looking forward to painting them. Oh man. Yeah, that got a little out of hand there. This guy's left eye just doesn't want to get painted. I guess it's his right eye, the eye that's on our left. There we go. Yeah. Got a blep of skin paint in his eyeball. It's alright. I'll be able to fix that. I may go for a smaller brush just to get that finer detail. But I like this paint because it's got good coverage, and it's going to get right down into the model, and I don't have to do a whole bunch of layers of it. I've seen painting guides where they recommend really watering the paint down for the first coat, and I'm not really a proponent of that. Partially because I'm doing a big army here, and it's going to take a lot of work to get it all done. So adding the extra time of doing multiple layers of the same color doesn't seem productive to me. I mean, it's not a vast army, but I've got what? 14 rebel figures to paint, not including Luke. So it's going to take me a little while anyways. Trying to get the back of his head and down into his collar here is tricky. So yeah, I really missed this. While I was at PAX, I did get more stuff to paint, but it's some very unusual stuff. So I bought a game called Anachrony. And Anachrony is a very intense worker placement board game. For anybody who's familiar with Euro worker placement games, they can be very complex, and Anachrony is right up there with the most complex ones I've seen, just in terms of all the pieces that it comes with. I took it back to the hotel after buying it at PAX and started punching out all the various bits, and realized there was no feasible way that I could do this project in a single night, or certainly not at like 1 a.m. in the hotel lobby during PAX, because there are so many pieces to Anachrony. It's a very cool game. The hook to it, the thing that really appealed to me, is that it has a time travel mechanic. It has a timeline that you put under the main board, and you can get resources in the game by stealing them from your future self. So you can, if you need more of a certain resource, you can take it from the future, and that leaves corruption in the timeline, which could cause problems for you later in the game. So you heal corruption in the timeline by sending stuff back to yourself in the past to close the loop. I love this concept. I think this is an awesome, awesome idea. I haven't had a chance to play it because there's so many pieces to this game. The reason I bring Anachrony up is it has an expansion. One of the play mechanics in Anachrony is that the world has become corrupted by a horrifying disaster, which it turns out in the lore of the game was caused by a meteor crash in the future with a type of mineral that caused temporal distortions. So, as a result, there's this temporal distortion mineral, but the surface of the planet is uninhabitable. So in order to do a lot of quests in the game, you have to put your workers in exosuits so that they can survive on the surface of the planet. And there's an expansion for Anachrony called Exosuit Commander that has some extra ways to play the game, but also has actual models of the exosuits that you can use in game. So, and the art style for Anachrony is very Art Nouveau, sort of Euro art. It reminds me in its art direction of Aeon Flux and things like that. So the figures for the expansion are very strange looking, and I'm kind of looking forward to painting them. So that's another painting project that I have. And it is now May. And in the US, where I am broadcasting from, we have Fallout Wasteland Warfare coming out in May. So both Amanda and I are going to be assembling and painting the Fallout Wasteland Warfare figures. And these guys look amazing. I am really, really looking forward to painting the Wasteland Warfare figures. It's just one of those things I've been anticipating ever since the game was announced. So, for anybody who doesn't know, Wasteland Warfare is a miniature war game along the same lines as Star Wars Legion or War Machine or Hordes or 40K, but it does have a co-op variant and a solo variant, so you can actually play against the Wasteland instead of having to play against somebody else. And I am always a proponent of co-op play when it's an option, so that I'm excited about. And I'm also really excited about being able to paint the minis for Wasteland Warfare. Amanda is going to be doing the Brotherhood of Steel folks and the Vault Dweller and Human folks, and I would like to work on the Super Mutants. Amanda painted up the figures for the Fallout board game, the Fantasy Flight Fallout board game, and if you watched her streams of that, it was really spectacular. And one of my favorites of the figures that she painted was that Super Mutant Brute. And I was like, oh man, I want to paint some Super Mutants. And I'm going to get that opportunity. We're getting the starting set, and I believe the Brotherhood of Steel expansion. And those are both coming out later this month. So, lots of cool painting to do, and I hope to be able to do some of it here on stream with you guys. You can see, or I don't know if you guys can see, but I can see that I didn't do any trimming of the mold lines. He's got a mold line that goes right across the back of his head here. That's okay. Like I constantly say, this is the demo set, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to get a finer detail brush and get the Evil Sunz Scarlet out again, just to touch up his eye. Just because I kind of blepped where I should have blooped. Got a little bit of paint where I didn't want it. That is not the brush I'm looking for. There we go. The problematically named Warhammer Psycho. This is the finest brush that I own, and it is basically at its tip just a hair. It is a single bristle, so it's perfect for this kind of detail. There we go. Much better. Much better. What do you think, chat? Very blue, right? Very, very bright blue. Well, that's okay, because when I apply the wash, that's going to darken right down. I definitely wanted to start with these guys, though, because it's just so much fun. You know, doing something, an unusual color. It looks very Tau, though. I have always said that if I played Warhammer 40K, I would probably start with a Tau army. They are space elves in mech suits. And I don't see how you could not play with space elves in mech suits. It just appeals to me on so many levels. Warhammer Fantasy recently released it's the something Deepkin, and they are underwater elves. I am intrigued by the Deepkin. I feel like they are. I mean, okay, so I don't play a lot of miniature war games. Most of my gameplay is board games and role-playing games. As you might know, I do a library D&D program with my wife. She is a children's librarian. So once a month I run a D&D session for 10 to 13-year-olds. It's a little chaos sometimes, but I really enjoy that. So I've painted a few D&D minis because it's always fun. But I have not. And for skirmish-based games, I have a complete set of the Wykar and Dakan armies from Rune Wars, another Fantasy Flight skirmish-based war game. But I've had very little opportunity to play it because the community in the area where I am is relatively small and it's hard to coordinate games. We've run a few events here at Battlegrounds and they've not been super well attended. But I love painting the minis. It's just, painting is such a pleasant experience. Getting in there, putting paint on models. With both Star Wars Legion and the Rune Wars miniature game, the assembly portion is deliberately very simple. They're both intended as games to lure in folks who are not hardcore miniature wargame players. So they're relatively, I don't know if, I'm sorry if anybody's in chat and I'm not seeing you, but my my chat seems to have frozen. Give me a sec here. I think my internet connection on my phone is not terribly good right now. So, sorry if anybody's been talking to me in chat and I haven't been responding. Technical issues on my end. There we go. Internet connection on my phone is not terribly good right now. So, I suspect that nobody is actually watching right now, so that's fine. It's early on a Monday morning, which is, and also some of the painters that I follow who are not in the US are actually streaming right now. So, for example, Paint with Penny in the UK is actually live right now, I believe. So, completely understandable that Penny might not be watching me paint because he's painting himself. You can definitely see why I need to get some paint on these guys. They're just very, I mean, it's a process. They're very monochrome because I've only got the base coat on or the prime coat on. I chose to prime them in green because I felt, most of their clothes are going to be green. I'm painting them as though they were on the forest moon of Endor, which I'm assuming in the greater Star Wars lore there's a name for that moon, but in the movie they only call it the moon of Endor. Endor is the planet that the moon orbits, not the name of the moon, right? I'm not wrong on that. Anyways, yeah, I'm going to do them in that style. And in those scenes, the rebels are all in sort of camo forest camo. So I said, well, I'll just prime them all in green, and that'll be appropriate. But the result is, as always with primer, they look good enough for basic demo games, but they're very bland. So I need to get some detail on them. My goal for today's stream, I'm only going to stream until 11 o'clock-ish. So another hour or so. My goal for today's stream is to get these Duros heads done and then start working on everybody's hats. I don't know, the hats appeal to me. It's a good focal point. And all the rebels have basically the same hat. So if I can nail down how I'm going to do it, it'll be just a matter of doing the repetitive hat painting steps. We'll get to that in a few minutes. I'm almost done with this second Duros guy. Just being careful painting around the eyes, because on the last one I had to do those little touch-ups. I'd like to avoid that if I can. There we go. I do think these sculpts are great. They've got all the little wrinkles in their brows, all the things that you need. You know what, this is very, very dark here. I'm going to bring in a little bit more white to balance the contrast, so that you guys can see a little bit better. Coming along great, though. Got the most difficult bits, which were around his eyes, and the rest of it is just big, wide, open spaces to cover. I'm going to stream for another hour or so today. See how many rebel hats I can do in that amount of time. One of the things I was most concerned with when I started painting miniatures, and this was about a year ago when I was working on the Wykar, the skeletal troops in the Rune Wars miniature game. One of the things that I was most concerned with was when you apply the paint to the model, I didn't want to fill the detail with paint and end up with a sort of bland sculpt. Like, I didn't want the paint to go into the cracks and actually muck them up. But with a little bit more experience, I've found that the paints are well designed to apply pigmentation without globbing into the model too much. The reason I mention this is just now painting this guy's forehead. He's got a very nice sort of brow sculpted in. Very wrinkly forehead. And, you know, when you're putting the paint on, it looks as if it's going into the creases in the brow there. I don't know if you can see the brow and his mouth. But as the paint dries, it's going to actually pull back a little bit. And that won't be so heavy. And then when you apply the wash, of course, the wash will go into those crevices and pop them right out. Make it very nice. All right, so that's the two Duros guys done. So again, very, very bright colors on them right now. When I'm done and put the wash on them, I'm hoping it'll darken them down enough that they'll look a little bit less garish. But for now, that's those two done. Let's work on some hats. So this is the reference I'm using for the Rebel Troopers. And for today, we're concentrating on the hats. You can see that the brim is a sort of gray-green, a darker gray-green. I'm going to try to mix that. I've got a wide variety of greens and grays. I'm going to try and mix something to meet that. And then the hat itself is a lighter brown, and then they've got these ear and chin straps, which are a darker brown. So that's my plan today, is to do the brim around the edge of the hats, the lighter brown and darker brown areas. So let's grab some Rebels. Here we go. You can see all the areas that I'm talking about here. There's like a little ear flap there. There's the brim around the edge. Honestly, I should do the bits that should be flesh toned first. Because, like I said earlier, the theory for painting, always do the lowest bits first. So do the face, then do the light brown ear flaps, then do the dark brown chin strap over it, and then do the brim, the sort of gray-green. For the faces, I don't want a monochromatic army. I want them to have racial variety. So I'm going to change colors as I go. I'll start light and I'll mix more browns into it. I have two very pale skin tones here. This is Tanned Flesh Army Painter, and this is Rose Brown Vallejo. And I'm going to start with those two, and then I'm going to add a little bit of brown to them. And so we'll just sort of do guys randomly. Just grab them randomly, and we'll have, you know, some very pale guys and some less pale guys. So let's start with two guys with just rose brown. That's not sufficiently shaken up. Shake, 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 shake. Okay. You can always tell when the paint is coming out all sort of marbly, that it's not enough, not shaken up enough. What did I just do with my paintbrush? There it is. It blended with the table because it's a black paintbrush and black table. Okay. So this is the AT-RT Pilot. So again, just like with Luke, I'm not concerned with doing details on the face because I'm going to let the sculpt do the detail work. When I apply a wash to this face, and I'll just use a skin tone wash, which is a sort of reddish wash. That wash will go down into the eyes and into the crevices in the lips, and it'll bring out those details without hyper accentuating them. These guys have a larger scale than some minis, so you probably could go in and give them white eyeballs. But with my skill level, I worry that it would end up looking cartoonish. And that's not what I want. Going for a little bit more realism here. And they do a flesh wash on the cheeks and mouth and a darker wash on the eyes to really make them look good. It looks like this guy's got a shirt on or a hoodie on. Yeah, you can see it's got a hood there. One of my favorite things about painting is discovering the details in the model. Yeah, his hood is down, so I'm going to have to get his back of his neck here. And this is exactly why you paint from the bottom up, is because if when I'm doing the back of his neck I get a little on his hoodie or his backpack, well, that's fine, because you're going to do those pieces next, and that's going to vanish. It's definitely a fine area to hit. That little area around his neck there. Nice. Already, he's looking a little more human and a little less green, which is definitely the objective here. He's wearing gloves, so I don't have to do his hands. Funny thing is, most of the rebels seem to have some facial hair. There's at least one that presents female. So she doesn't have facial hair. One sculpt, I mean. There's two of them because there's two of each sculpt here. But of the rebel dudes, I feel almost all of them have facial hair, except for our buddy here, the ATRT pilot. Let's stick him back on the ATRT. Already looking better, right? Improvements. I'm so glad I've got his other arm now, too. Thank you, Fantasy Flight, for being so quick to get me that arm. Who's next? This is one of the heavy gunners. Don't use them in the Learn to Play game, but might as well paint them. I believe this is a flame thrower this heavy gunner is using. Don't have to do the neck for this person because their neck is completely covered. Covered in mold lines that I never trimmed. I feel like half of detail work in painting is finding the right angle to go at it from. It's weird in this sculpt, it's like one of this person's eyes is covered up by their ear flap. Maybe it's a bandage? Anyways. There's that person. Maybe do one more person in this flesh tone and then we'll go to something else. So it seems obvious to me that if you're doing rebels, they have to have a variety of flesh tones. Because, oh, here's a heavy gunner. He's definitely got a mustache. He's actually got a little goatee. It's very cute. But it seems obvious to me that rebels would have to have a variety of flesh tones because, and I appreciate that they put 2 aliens in the rebel squad. Because when I think of the rebellion in general, I think of something that's more inclusive, something that's more representational, whereas the Empire is very monolithic and tries to, and oppressive, obviously. So just want to give as much variety to my rebels as I can. It is not by mistake that the Imperial uniforms are inspired by the SS and Nazi uniforms. It's not terribly subtle, Star Wars. Subtlety has never been a hallmark of Lucas's world. Got a little bit on his backpack, but that's fine. You can see that there are some areas where the primer did not make it to the model. And some bits under here where he's not primed. Hopefully that won't negatively impact when I paint those areas, and hopefully the paint will adhere properly to the plastic that's unprimed. And the whole reason you prime, I believe, is to bond the paint better to the plastic. All right. Leave his mustache bare. I'll come back at that at a later time. It's okay if I get some flesh-colored paint on his mustache because I'm going to be painting over that anyways. It's perfectly fine. But if I leave it bare, it'll be a reminder to me to come back. I love painting, and it is, as I have said, very relaxing and terrific fun, but boy does the time disappear. Okay, he's looking pretty good. For first coat. That was tan to flesh. Let's do some rose brown. And then we'll be adding a little bit of darker brown to that. Actually, no, that was rose brown. Where's the tan to flesh? I'd like to be able to do an Asian hue, but I'm not confident in my paint mixing skills. Who's next? Okay, here's a guy who's fallen off their base. This person does not have a goatee, but does have a mustache. feel like this paint should be better mixed. Okay. There we go. So this person has fallen off of their base, which is a problem I've been having with the Star Wars minis, is that they don't stick to their bases very well. Boy, this is a watery paint. I have to do a couple of coats if I'm going to do this particular paint. It's not going to cover up the green. He's going to be all green toned. It's not what I'm going for here. But yeah, a lot of my folks keep plopping off their bases. So a project that I'm going to undertake, probably on stream, so you'll get to watch me do it, is I am going to drill and pin anybody who comes off their base, which is to say I have some little rods that I can snip off and drill holes in their feet and actually use these rods as extra reinforcement and provide a better way to keep them stuck to their base. If this doesn't work on this paint, I'm going to give up on this paint and just start blending the other paint to make it more dark. It's a little better. Yeah. It's definitely going to take more than one coat. So for reference, this is the Army Paint Tanned Flesh. And it is much more watery than the Vallejo and does not offer as much coverage. Which is, you know, fine. It's a nice color. I like it. I just wish I could get it on in one coat instead of two or more. Like I said earlier, I'm going for quantity here, so I kind of want to be able to get as much coverage in a single coat as I can. Right now, he's holding his gun right in front of his face. If I had painted this guy before gluing his arms on, this portion might be easier. But I'm just going to have to work with what I've got. I assembled everybody before painting them. Which means I have to work the angles. Maybe tomorrow morning we'll do that drilling and pinning project. Put this fellow back on his base and give him a second coat at the same time. Oh man. I guess, yeah, there's the downside of I have to paint around his arm and behind the gun to get the paint onto his face. But the flip side of that is it's going to be less visible if I mess the paint up because it's obscured by this gun in his face. So if he looks awful, that's okay, because people will not be able to see the bits that I messed up. Definitely got a clean-shaven chin and a mustache. So I guess if I had this to do again, if I was starting a new squad, just throw my brush away. If I was doing this all from scratch, I probably would paint the individual pieces before assembly, and I would drill and pin everybody who's going on to their base, just preemptively, rather than having to go back in and correct things. So if anybody ends up watching this video and is in the Abington, Massachusetts area, come on down and play with these. I mean, that's what I did this for. If you want to test out how Star Wars Legion works, if you're curious to know what the game is all about, this box is sitting on the demo wall. And if I happen to be here, I'm happy to run you through a learn to play game, which is not the full rule set, but does give you some basic introduction to how to play. I'm actually kind of glad this guy isn't on his base, because his base would make this even harder. I'm assuming this guy just has a really bulky chin and is not wearing some sort of sweater or something, or some sort of shirt under his shirt. That's what it looks like to me, at least. Okay. I got paint in most of the areas I want to get paint on his face. Maybe get this cheekbone here. Just in there. Oh, I got some paint on his hat. That's why I wanted to do this. Get their faces before I do the hats, so that if I get paints on the hats, I'm going to be painting over it. Anyways, here's that fellow. Who's next? Nope, that's the same mold. I'm not going to do two the same. This is one of the commanders. The Imperial commanders have a very, I'll actually pull one out, a very distinctive look to them, because they have these shoulder pads that you can conveniently paint to make them pop. Of course, my Imperial Commander is not completely painted, and they had that primer disaster. But you can see I've painted his shield, or his epaulet, that nice bright orange, which makes him easy to spot on the battlefield, so you know who the commander is of the Imperial unit. The Rebel Commander unit doesn't have a cool epaulet like that. He does have this flowing jacket, which is very cool. So I don't have any way to make him pop as much. You just have to know the guy with the big overcoat. He's the commander. And he also has a little goatee going. So I don't think I'm going to get to hats today. Sorry, guys. But I will get a lot of faces done. And tomorrow, hopefully, we'll do that drill and pin thing. And hopefully, we'll get to do some facial hair and hats. Yeah, this paint definitely needs a second coat. Not as much of a fan. This goes on very watery. It'll be okay ultimately, but it's making more work for me. You can probably see how very wet that is and how it's just not getting much coverage over the green primer. Oh well. He's got a whole Tony Stark goatee going on there. He's going to need a second coat tomorrow. All right, that's that. So let's try a little blending. And then put just a hint of oak brown. Come on, eyedropper. You can do it. I'm going to need to get myself more oak brown soon. Oh, come on. Here we go. Blend those up a little bit. Next up, we're doing this person with the gun held right up against their cheek. That is the female trooper, I believe. tricky. Well, it's fine. Any mistakes I make at this stage be easily covered up as I move forward. Just have to sort of wedge the paint in there at this stage. Pretty good. Okay. Add a little more brown. I'm just going to keep adding brown, making this darker as I go. I should have a better tool for blending than my brush. This trooper has a full beard. Oops, hold him off camera. There we go. He has a full beard. So I only need to get like the bits of his face that are above and below the full beard here. Definitely makes things a little easier. Get his chin here, his neck. I think this is definitely the trooper who's in that screenshot I'm using for reference. I think he may actually be a character from Star Wars Rebels. Not sure about that. It's actually kind of fun to get to decide, there we go, what color you're going to do, not having a predetermined color. Like I could do his beard white, I could do his beard dark black, I could give him a yellow beard. There are so many options. I'm just going to get a tiny nudge in underneath his chin there. Obviously, I'll be covering a lot of that up, but just... There we go. He's done. still have done. Okay, these are all the ones that are still awaiting more detail. Got 6 more to go. Another heavy gunner. Going on kind of gloppy and thick, but hopefully it's okay. When it dries, it should contract a bit. He's also got a little bit of pocking in the primer. Not a super fan of the Army Paint primers that I used. I feel like they came out of the can not very well. Maybe I should have used a brush primer instead of aerosol primer on all these guys, but I was in a hurry, and I've never had problems with aerosol primers before. Just in this particular circumstance, I had a number of primer disasters. In the past, I've always used just black Warhammer primer, the Chaos Black, and it has always served me well. So maybe trying to be fancy and do these guys in white and green primer was a mistake. Okay, there's him. So I can wick away some of this heavy paint on his cheek here. It's better. Okay. 5 more. I may go a little bit past my goal of painting until 11 o'clock, but that's fine. This poor individual has few details to start with because of the primer, and now they've got fewer because the paint's going on thick. It's okay. It's only the demo set and not maybe because I'm going faster now, I'm getting up against a time crunch. I'm putting too much paint on the brush. I need to be careful about that. Putting too much paint on the brush is definitely a rookie mistake and something that I have been guilty of in the past. Looking good. A little darker. I should put my palette on screen here so you can see what I'm doing. This is my palette here, and I'm just blending up in this patch here. This is quite dark indeed now, which is cool. Giving me exactly what I was looking for, which is a variety of skin tones. Very chocolatey look now. To get right in between the gun and the face here. My hair's getting in the way. It'll do the trick. Should probably have a lamp right up against my face here so I can see what I'm doing when I'm in the shadows. That's pretty good. I got the cheek here. There. 3 more. Oh, that is dried. Dried right up. not worried about precision getting in around this fellow's mustache and beard, because I'm going to be painting his beard over. So it's okay if I glop paint all over the place. They are doing road work outside. I don't know if you guys can hear that jackhammer. That's lovely. We're getting paint everywhere. It's okay. All okay. Okay, pretty good. What do you think, guys? Coming along. Last two. Having let this paint sit on the palette, this is the paint that was really watery. Having let it sit on the palette for a little while has let it thicken up some. It's not quite so bad now. Still gonna need to do a second coat. I'm beginning to think perhaps this model is meant to have some sort of undershirt, but too bad. Just looks like he's got a double chin or a goiter. Because, yep, I'm painting it flesh colored. Paint is still fairly watery. It's fine. Everything's fine. All right, last one. The other commander. What color did I make this commander? Okay, yeah. Almost done for the day. There. Lovely. Well, I didn't get to do any hats, but I did a bunch of faces. Looking forward to doing these beards. We'll do a second coat on some of these folks. We'll do that drill and pin. So, yeah. It is about 11 o'clock Eastern right now. I got some paint on every one of the rebels. From the very, very pale to the slightly darker of skin to the blue with red eyes. We're definitely making progress on these folks. And tomorrow, I hope to make more progress. So my plan for tomorrow is I'm going to come in early again, paint from maybe 9:30 to 11 o'clock again, and I would hope that some folks will join me then. And then tomorrow afternoon is another episode of Patrick Plays Magic, which is our Tuesday afternoon Magic the Gathering program. So stick around for that tomorrow afternoon. And Friday, we are going to be playing board games as always at 7:30. So we look forward to having folks join us on Friday. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope that this is entertaining and educational, and I hope folks are having fun watching me. I'm certainly having a lot of fun painting. I really, really look forward to getting a hold of all of the Fallout Wasteland Warfare stuff from Modiphius, so look forward to that. That's going to be happening later this month. In the meantime, I think I'm going to call it a day for today's stream. Thank you for joining me. Be sure to join the Discord that's in the links down there if you want to talk with us, or just come on into the store and say hi. I love talking to folks, and it's always a pleasure to see you. And yeah, I will see you tomorrow morning. Bye, everybody. Have a pleasant day.